So if you want to go ahead, give us a brief introduction about who you are, your name, what you do.
Yikes. Yeah, these questions are always weird because I don't like talking about myself. I like talking about helping other people. But yeah, my name is Dejon Campbell. I live in Dallas, Texas, born and raised in Washington, D.C.,
Oh,
and
wow.
I work in the LGBTQ inclusion space. So I lead a affirming church that is for everyone. We welcome and love everyone. There are no logistics to our love. And I post content that helps to further the conversation when it comes to what it means to be inclusive, what it means to not be racist, and what it means to just love people, and what it means to stand up for women as well. That's a big part of what I do too.
That is awesome. So I do like to just know, what are your pronouns?
I'm he, him,
Okay.
his.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm she, her, hers.
I was gonna ask. Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, good. I like to make sure I'm aware of that. So I found you on TikTok, which was
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
And I was like, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for Black History Month on my YouTube channel and overall just my social media, I wanted to gear it to people who are breaking those norms,
Oh,
and especially the video I came across on your channel was about how you were bisexual and you're also a minister. And I was like, that is the definition of breaking the norms. Like
yeah, no
nobody wants to
kidding.
talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so my first question for you is what made you get into like the ministry? Like what was your upbringing, your beliefs? Like how did that all come together?
Whew. How long is this? How long is this thing?
However much time you need.
no, no. So I lost my dad when I was 4 years old,
Oh wow.
and that was in a lot of ways. I didn't really know my dad because I was so young,
Hmm.
but still, the loss of a father is huge.
Right.
And so right after that, my mom really got us involved in church. I mean, we came from a very religious background, but really we were going to church like once every quarter, whatever. And um and she got me involved in church, and I joined the choir and all of that. And then one day, I never forget, I was watching Reverend Dr. Granger Browning from Ebenezer AME Church in Fort Washington, Maryland. Shout out. Um, and I was sitting in the pew, and he was preaching this sermon, and I had heard sermons before and seen sermons before, but this one like arrested me because
Wow.
I was so like intrigued with how he was preaching and how much energy he had and how he connected with the crowd. And it was at that moment as a young kid where I was like, I think this is what I'm called to do. And from there, as a young kid, I used to go home after church, get my mom's oversized t-shirt, get the TV remote, set up some chairs, and get my Bible and preach a sermon,
Oh
re-preach a
wow.
sermon that I heard previously. I thought I could preach it better. And so from
That is awesome.
yeah, from a young age, I just knew that this was my calling, and I never stopped.
Wow, that's honestly amazing. Like,
Yeah.
especially at such a young age, how like knowing what your calling is, that's powerful.
I look, I've tried running from it a number of times, but my cousins can tell you I used to bring them into the basement of my great grandmother's house and set up a little pink podium and force them to listen to my sermons as a kid.
Wow.
I'm sure they're still damaged by that, but that's not my problem.
So I want to go more into so like you said, your platform, what you do on your social media and things like that is all about being affirming, being inclusive. So I want to know, how did you get into that in terms of like you had your calling about being a pastor at a young age, but once you started, like when you would like when was your turning point of you kind of questioning your sexuality or becoming more clear
Mm.
in what that was, and how did that affect you?
So I always knew that I was attracted to both sexes. I always knew that. Like one of my first kisses was with a guy.
Oh,
back
wow.
in the day, in the classroom, third grade. Okay, come on. And I always knew that. I just never knew how to identify it because it really wasn't something that I was surrounded with.
Right.
I was surrounded by a lot of people from the LGBTQ community. At least they weren't open about it, right?
Mhm.
And so I knew very early on, but because of me being on staff at churches that weren't affirming, being in spaces that was not affirming, being a part of the LGBTQ community, almost being like the butt of a joke, and something that wasn't taken seriously, I I stayed in the closet. And then on top of that, for most of my 20s, um, well, when I was 19 up until like my mid 20s, I was dating a woman. So,
Gotcha.
there was no like need to come on out and tell the world. Okay.
Right.
I wasn't, but the biggest piece was ministry. And um I ended up applying for I was at a church in Austin that was non-affirming, so I was not out. And I applied for a church in Washington, DC, um, to join their staff. They gave me the job. And I was gonna move up there. And right before I was supposed to move, they wanted me to sign a covenant that
Mhm.
singled out the LGBTQ community in it, saying that if you subscribe to the LGBTQ community, if you're a part of it in any kind of way, we prefer you not to serve. And it was at that moment in 2019 where I said, I'm either going to continue down this road of hiding this piece of who I am, this the fullness of my humanity, or I'm going to come out and I'm going to help other people along the way. And it was the fall of 2019 that I made that decision. And I made the decision not just for me, but I made the decision for all of those young people who I had pastored over the years who had came out to me, and I couldn't give them a full response of love. Um, to my cousins that had came out before and were treated unfairly by some of my family. It was for that reason. And so I'm not going to say I stumbled into it, but it was like a light switch for me. It was just a quick decision, like, I'm going to do this. And the first people I came out to from the church was the church that I declined.
Wow.
And so I don't regret it. I thank God for it. We just had a live on TikTok last week, where someone was thinking about taking their life, and they came across my content and said that helped save their life. So
That's
you can't tell
awesome.
me God isn't in this, and I don't regret it at all.
Wow. That's great that you were able to kind of be true to yourself and what you believe and what you stand for, and kind of, because I feel like most people would be like, well, I'll just do it. And then they live that life of regret and they're like, now I'm in it and what am I supposed to do? But it's
Yeah,
amazing that you were kind of able to be like, you read that and you're like, that's just not, who I am. And I'm tired of hiding. And I
yes,
think so many people get turned away, like, especially in the LGBTQ community, they get turned away because of they get turned away from religion specifically because of how a lot of religious leaders and how just a lot of religious people overall treat them. And I
yeah,
mean, I know for me personally, I was raised in church, but I was never like I was on the dance team and things like that. And I have pretty religious family members, but
that must
I
have been a
know,
Baptist church.
yeah, partially Baptist, Pentecostal, all that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And I remember, like, especially when I started kind of figuring out who I was my freshman year of high school, I was like, and then it took me to, be with the partner I am with now, and her
Mm,
being like, well, do you believe those things or do you believe them because that's what everybody has been shoving down your throat
yes,
for all
yes,
your life?
yes.
And I was like, that's a good point. Like, I never took a step back to evaluate until she kind of brought that up to me. And it did give me a minute because then a lot of the churches around me that I was going to would literally stand on their podiums and things like that and preach against LGBTQ. And you could feel that when it kind of happened in church, it was just very awkward. And
I know it.
So it's really great that, you were able to take a step back and, like I said, stay true to who you were, but also the fact that you're starting that platform where people like you and me can go to church, still believe in God, but go to a place where they're safe and they feel welcome.
It's so important. I can't tell you how important it is. The first thing that's taken from us as LGBTQ people is our spirituality.
Hmm.
We come out and we're told that we can't be a Christian. We're told that we're going to hell. We're told that we're less than, as a person. We're told that we're a mistake. We're told that I've been told a demon is inside of me. Like all of these different things. And that's the first thing that's taken from us. And that has to stop,
Right.
and I don't know what other questions you have geared towards the Bible, if any, but just I have to say this. In so many ways, we have um we have not done the necessary research on what the Bible actually says. We haven't studied the context. We haven't looked at the true interpretation of the text. And I've talked to women pastors, which, by the way, to all your viewers, I stand for women, okay? I love women. So don't come for me in the comments. But there was a woman pastor who came to me and she said, I just don't know how you can be LGBTQ and Christian. It's not of God. I said, well, how did you come up with that? She said, because of the scriptures. I said, what scriptures? She listed the scriptures. I said, well, have you studied the context of those scriptures? She said back to me, I just read the Bible word for what it is, in which I responded to her by leading her to a scripture in First Timothy and a scripture in First Corinthians that talked about women being silent in the church, how women should not have authority over a man. So her being a pastor was not in the will of God.
Right.
She also had braids, so I led her over to First Peter, where it said that you should not have braids as a woman, and she said, "Oh well, that's taken out of context." And I asked her, "How did you get to that place?" And she said, "Oh, I studied it." Oh, okay, so you'll study the scriptures that pertain to your life, but when it
Right.
comes to the lives of other people, and it's not your personal preference, then you don't want to study it. So I think as a church, we have to get better with studying the scriptures that don't even fit our personal preferences, because we have people in our congregations who are LGBTQ, who are women, who are Black, who are marginalized, who are underserved. And so you have to we just have to do better with it. It's a shame
Right.
that we still have pastors getting up on a pulpit on Sundays and talking down to a community in the same way that white pastors used to talk about Black people to condone segregation back in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and going back to what you're saying, you're right. People think that when you're LGBTQ, like your whole belief system is like flushed down the toilet. I mean, when I was coming out, people like for some reason had this idea that I no longer believed in like God or a higher
Yeah.
power. And I'm
Wow.
like, nobody said that. Like, like what does that have
Yeah.
to do with anything?
Yeah.
And even to this day, I mean, out of the people in my life, I still heavily listen to like worship music and things like that. And, people always get kind of shocked by it because they're like, oh, you listen to that? And I'm like, just because I'm like, identifying within a community has nothing to do with my spiritual or religious outlook on life.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It it is almost as if when you come out, it is this thought that you have just completely forsaken Jesus.
Right,
It's like, oh, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm trans, I'm queer, I'm bisexual. Oh, I don't rock with Jesus no more. And that's not the case. Some of
right,
the most saved, sanctified, anointed, called people I know are living in the fullness of who God created them to be. And so to have this thought that somehow we all need to like the same thing, look the
hmm,
same way, dress the same way, be the same way is crazy. The Bible talks about the diversity of the saints. The Bible talks about the body having many parts. That's what makes up the body of Christ. It's not just everyone looking like an arm. It's having an arm. It's having a leg. It's having a lung. It's having a head. All these different pieces that don't look the same make up the body.
right,
So why would we not accept someone who is different than us. That's the gospel, man.
Yeah, it's wild. So the next question I have for you, um, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how has being a bisexual pastor in the industry, I guess you could say, how has that shaped your experience as a pastor, and how has that affected you being a person of faith?
Yeah, I think it's being a part of the community in general has taught me to see people and to love people. Because even being someone who identifies as bisexual, within the community, sometimes we can be um, judgmental and look
Yes.
down on people. I know gay people who look down on trans people, queer people who
Hmm.
look down on bisexual people. I know lesbians who will look at me and say, a man can't be bisexual. Like, and so I think it's as a human being first, it's taught me to extend my love in deeper ways towards a number of different people. As a pastor, it's done the same thing. You know, in a lot of ways, I would say being a pastor of an affirming church is more of a challenge than non-affirming, only because um, there is, if you go to a non-affirming church, a lot of people aren't. Some people are bringing in church hurt, but it's a different kind of church hurt with LGBTQ people.
Right.
There's a different level of trauma that you have to deal with and counsel people through and help people through. And so having to do that is a challenge, but one that I love and one that I welcome. And the other side to it too is I'm fairly young. I'm
Yeah.
a millennial in these streets, and so there's there's still so much I'm trying to figure out.
Right.
And I would say, look, asking that question in like 10 years, and I might have a better answer. But right now, I'm just like, I think being a bisexual man who is a Christian and a pastor is just helping me to love people better. Like that's been my experience. That's what I
That
got right
is
now.
That is awesome. That's really good though. I think a big part of what people who are in the LGBTQ community need in terms of like that spiritual religious route is they need that love. I think that's like you
Yeah.
said, it's a different level of trauma that a lot of them have faced, that a lot of people have gone through, in terms of trying to be who they are, but also trying to go to church, which is part of who they are.
Yeah.
And so many people turn them away. So many people, bash them or give backhanded, compliments or
Yeah.
statements. And I think love is overall a big part of what we need, in terms of church, in terms of the community. Because, like you said, there are so many people in the community who don't believe in other parts of it. And I'm like, hey, we are all going through this together. We have
Yep.
all faced our struggles. We have to support one another.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. And look, I also feel like in a lot of ways we've overcomplicated what it means to be a Christian and what
Hmm.
it means to be in the community of believers. Jesus never said you needed to jump through 45 hoops in order to be a Christian. Belief is the prerequisite to
Hmm.
salvation. That's it. And the prerequisite um to making sure that we create a community of believers is love. So in that's the greatest commandment, love your neighbor. As like,
Right.
I think we have completely missed that, not just in affirming churches but non-affirming churches more so. If we lead with love and we don't have logistics to our love, I feel like we would have a lot more people wanting to be a part of what God is doing
Right.
through our churches. The issue has never been um I would say the issue has never been Jesus per se. The
Hmm.
issue has been that people have thought that based on the words of people, Jesus does not love them,
Right.
right? And so I can believe it. I've talked to a lot of LGBTQ people, and they've said, I believe in Jesus. I just don't believe he loves me. And so,
Hmm.
how do we change the narrative of that? How do we tell the truth about who Jesus is? And how do we give the love that he has given us every single day to other people who may not look like us?
Right.
That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do.
That is great. No, that's right though, because I wouldn't say from my personal standpoint that I would like I don't believe he loves me because there's even a few other like YouTubers and content creators who are also part of the LGBTQ and who have spoken and they're like, for all the people who say like God doesn't love or Jesus doesn't love the LGBTQ individuals, he was like, then why does he continue to bless me in the way he does? Why does he
Yeah.
continue to show up in my life in different ways? And that is literally me because I'm like, every time I'm stressing about something or every time, I'm feeling down about something, I always get some sort of clarity
Yeah.
through some person who I'm like, God sent you to me because
Yeah.
I needed that in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's so crazy? I I spent I've been in ministry for about maybe 9 years now, and
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of life change. But this season of my life is crazy good because it's a different kind of transformation I'm seeing in people's lives. Like,
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, you're a part of these large churches and you see the same people come
Yeah.
and everyone believes the same, like everyone dresses, all of that. And now I feel like this is real ministry, like
Hmm.
counseling people and helping them come back into the truth of who they are. And like I just feel like my ministry is the most diverse it's ever been. But I feel like it's also the most impactful that it's ever been. Because I'm literally going after people who have been shut up by the church for so long. And we have to do that. Like Jesus, I'll say this, and I've created content about this. God
Hmm.
not only created LGBTQ people, um, but he loves LGBTQ people. He not only loves LGBTQ people, he affirms them. He
Hmm.
has called them and created them and anointed them and given them purpose. And anyone who says that that is not true, I would challenge their I would challenge the God that they serve. Then I'll say that.
That's powerful. That is really
Um,
powerful. So big question. Where do you see yourself
oof.
in, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Ah, somewhere on a beach with a Mai Tai, hopefully. um, with a little bit less gray hair because I've dyed it. No, I would say because I've kind of mapped this out, but I'm learning not to like plan everything
Oh my gosh,
and
that's me.
right, like in 10 years I'm gonna be pulling to a house and this gonna be the number of the house. No, I I see myself still working in the LGBTQ inclusion space, but specifically I'll talk about Haus because that's like my baby.
Right.
Um, I see Haus dominating in a number of different areas. So you have, yes, Haus, the faith community, which will have church and services and all of that. I also want Haus outreach, where
Hmm.
we're going around the world helping people who are underserved, and giving not just to spaces locally but globally as well. Haus films, where we're creating like faith-based thing. And look, when I say faith-based, I'm not talking about these Hallmark movies. I'm talking about like, those. I just be like, girl, you want to cuss. Stop.
Right.
This don't even feel real.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want
yeah.
to create like I want to create television shows and movies and podcasts and talk shows where we can just have space to be human. Like not even, yes, we're Christian, but just human.
Right.
And so I think 5 to 10 years, I see one Haus just dominating in a number of different industries, and me employing people from different walks of life and backgrounds and sexual orientations and genders and gender identities. But me personally, I would say um, having a little bit more peace
Mm,
is something I've been praying about. Um, being more grounded in a lot of areas of my life as well. In a lot of ways, I feel like I'm just this young millennial who's just all over the place. Um, so being a little bit more grounded and just continuing to love people. I don't think there's going to be like this humongous transformation. I mean, I think I'll look back and I'll say like, well, Dejon, gosh, you were really dumb back then, or you weren't really thinking then. But the true essence of who I am, I don't want
right.
that to change. I don't want that to change.
That is great. And I can't wait to continue to watch your journey and what you like become, especially like outreach has been something I've always been interested in, but going
Yeah.
back to feeling safe, I feel like that's a big reason why I've never like truly done it, because I'm like, I want to go with people I feel comfortable around. I feel safe around.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that is amazing. And they're just like everything you were saying, I'm just like, I love that. Like it is so great.
I mean it. I'll tell you this. I don't know if you've done this, and or any of if your viewers have done it. If you haven't, don't judge me. It's okay. I'm not crazy. But I used to literally practice in the mirror or in the car
Uh-huh.
conversations like this. Like when
Really?
yes, because I've always wanted to like come out and be able to
Mhm.
be true and have open dialogue, but couldn't. So I used to have conversations like just by myself, like pretending I'm on the red carpet or pretending I'm on a podcast,
Yeah.
and to actually see it happen um is crazy. And if you would have told me I would be sitting here talking about being affirming and being bisexual and being Christian 5 years ago, I would say you were crazy. So I've just learned to not put limitations on my future. And whatever happens, happens. I have goals, I have dreams, yes. But I just know God has some big things in store. And 5, 10 years, who knows what I'm gonna be on a podcast talking about.
Right.
Lord.
No, I completely understand. I've done it. I do it now sometimes where I'm like, oh yeah, like I pretend like I'm like on someone's like talk show or like
Yes.
talking about myself and my life, and I'm like, oh, how did I get here?
You better speak that into existence. I'll be on an
Yes,
Oscars red carpet on Tuesday in my bathroom.
yes. You cannot. I know you have to speak life into yourself for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Speak life
absolutely.
into yourself, your future, what you believe for yourself, and also just following what God's plan is for you.
It's so important. I love
Yes.
your spirit, by the way. I
Thank
mean,
you.
it's such just a warm spirit. I love it. I love it.
Now, when I found you, I'm like, I hope he responds, because I was like, just like seeing your platform, I was like, you can tell he has such a pure and genuine heart.
Oh,
And that is something that I thrive for in people. I'm like, I wasn't one that had, like you said, I wasn't one that had a lot of LGBT people around me growing up.
yeah.
And so even as an adult, I still don't have a lot of those kind of people in my life. And I always joke with people and I'm like, I'm tired of the streets. Like, where are my people at? And it's so important to surround yourself with people who are like you, because you also share those experiences. Like,
Yeah,
an
yeah,
experience that you and I might share, being in the LGBTQ community isn't the same as a friend of mine and I might share if she's straight.
absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
right. It's no different than, black and white friends having different experiences. But, our sexual orientation also shapes our experiences. I was even telling a friend I met recently that a lot of the times I wouldn't say now, but before, a lot of the times when I would first meet people, I wouldn't talk about my girlfriend. I wouldn't talk about, my
Mm,
sexual orientation, because you just never know how people are going to treat you, how people are going to
yeah,
react. And I didn't do that because I was ashamed, but it was more of I had to be sure like I'm comfortable and safe around this person
yeah,
before I go letting out something that personal about myself. Because at the end of the day, it isn't their business, but I don't want to have to hide, that I have a girlfriend, or
yeah.
hide that, part of myself. But sometimes people don't realize that they're not in a safe environment, and that completely messes you up. So I
It
think it's
does.
really important, your platform, what you're doing, I just think overall it's amazing. And I was like, I would love to talk to him.
Oh,
Like,
well,
I would
I'm
love
glad
to get his insight.
I'm really glad you reached out. Like, seriously, for some reason, you're not the first person to say, Dejon, I didn't think you were going to DM me. I will respond to well, not every, but as many DMs as possible.
Right.
I believe in that. I'm never going to get too important for that. Like anyone who, and trust me, I know people like that. They've got a couple of followers and a couple
Hmm.
thousand views, and they think they Beyonce, and
Right.
that's not. God did not bless you with the platform for you to be prideful,
Right.
or for you to for you not to love the people that actually like have helped you get to where you are. That's just crazy to me. So I'm always reach out. And when I saw your message, I instantly just felt like she probably got something good going. I just I don't know. I think I can feel like people's energy and people's spirit through what they send. I just do, and I think you can also sense it through their posts as well.
Right.
Like you can feel if someone's being genuine, or feel if someone has a warm spirit and all that. So when I saw your stuff, I'm like, I have to do it. She's fantastic. What she's doing is needed, and I'm glad that you reached out. I really am.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you responded and you agreed to this.
Of course.
So I want to go ahead and follow it up, or close it up with, what is one piece of advice that you would give anyone who wants to get into ministry,
Hmm.
or who is drawn to the church but hasn't fully made that commitment, who is identifying as part of the LGBTQ community?
Oof. Yeah, that's a good question. One, I would say go on the journey of loving yourself. Um, Before I came out publicly, I had come to terms with, I don't even like using verbiage like that, like coming to terms, like it's such a bad thing.
Right.
um, but I went on the journey of loving myself and accepting myself and affirming myself. So by the time I came out publicly, it really didn't matter what anyone else said, because I had already taken that journey for myself. And so come out to yourself, affirm yourself, love yourself, know who you are in Christ. Um, because look, if I did not affirm myself, if I did not love myself, if I wasn't firm in who I am in Christ, I don't know what I would do, because every day on, it seems like every post I'm getting some kind of hate or some
Right.
kind of backlash, right? So it's about being firm. So love yourself too. I would say keep a great circle around you. Even if that's one friend, they better wrap those arms around you tight. Having supportive people around you, people who can affirm you, important to you, and love you is so important, because working in this space, being in this space, it's difficult. It is. I'm not going to lie. It is difficult, because you're going up against so many different ideologies and thought processes and beliefs that do not align with what you believe. So you have to make sure you're surrounded by the right people. And three, I would say, look, find the right church. And if you can't find it, start it. Like,
Right.
that's so important. Um, to that person that's LGBTQ and wants to be in ministry, you do not have to hide your sexuality. You should not hide your sexuality. God gave you that for a reason. Go after it and love yourself and love people. That's the most important thing. And it's so easy to start a ministry. You just got to be called to do it.
Right. That is great. And I think that, especially my platform, I want to start the conversations that people are not willing or too afraid to have. And I think that
Yeah.
this is a big conversation, is, the LGBTQ people and the church. Like,
Yeah.
nobody ever wants to talk about that. And when they do, it's usually something negative.
Yeah.
And so I think that what you're doing, what Haus is doing, I think that is amazing. I know when I found you and I found your the Haus church page, and I was like
Yeah.
sending it to people, I'm like, look at what
Oh,
he's doing.
oh my gosh.
I'm
Oh, that
like,
means
that's
a lot.
just amazing. Like, we need those inclusive spaces that are safe for us, but
Yeah.
that are just safe for people overall, that are just shedding love, shedding light. I think that is super important,
Yeah.
in what's going forward.
Well, we're even changing how church is done. Like when we first started House, it was kind of like, oh, let's do the typical church service, and we'll have some singing and some preaching, and we'll have communion. And it's like, well, what does church really look like? Like,
Right.
let's reimagine what church can look like. And so I think in the next couple of weeks, couple of months, you'll start to see that we'll have more conversations like this, instead of a sermon, because this is a sermon. Like,
Right.
when this goes out, people are going to be blessed. People are going to be able to see Jesus in a different way. How do we make things unique, and how do we do things differently, and how do we reach people, who we would not reach through me standing up and talking for 45 minutes? Like,
Right.
so yeah, I appreciate it though. Thank you for sending it. Come on.
Yes. Thank you so much for talking to me. Thank you
Of
for everybody who tuned in. I can't wait to share this video and just share your platform and what you're doing, because it really is great. Like, I don't think I could say that enough times.
Well, what you're doing is great, and
Thank you.
this is just the start for you. Like, what's going to take you so far, is your spirit. Like,
Mm,
I know of a lot of talented people who don't have the spirit to match up with the talent, don't have the character,
gotcha.
don't have the integrity. Like, you have such a warm spirit, and your approach is so unique. So I think that is what's going to take you so far, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot. Thank you.
Of course, of course.
And